At the start of A Single Pale Rose, when Steven was sitting, waiting, trembling, dripping in sweat, desperately trying to patiently hold out for Amethyst to leave Pearl alone so he can finally talk to her and get answers. In this moment, Steven really felt like a stand-in for the audience whenever we were slow-dripped lore and then had to sit through many episodes of fluff hijinks before we were granted access to more. I saw it as a knowing nod of beguilement on behalf of the creators. They were playfully taunting us at the start of the episode because after A Single Pale Rose comes to a close, we would not be able to look at Steven Universe the same way again. A long-standing fan theory that's largely been met with derision turned out to be true. Rose Quartz was Pink Diamond. Pink Diamond became Rose Quartz. This episode left a lot of people in shock, and many had to take time to collect their thoughts, work their way through their emotions. I think one of the reasons the episode felt so overwhelming was because it was crafted exquisitely. The presentation, the pacing, the careful attention to detail, and the sound design, all of it fused to create what I guess you could call an experience. A Single Pale Rose did an excellent job of drawing the viewer in and having us get caught up in the upswell of it all. Basically, what I'm saying is, even if you disliked the twist, you gotta admit that the execution behind the twist's reveal was well handled. Personally, I did like the twist. Taking a step back and trying to view the reveal removed of all emotion, which can be tough because Steven Universe is all about the appeal to emotion, I do feel it's a bit dumb. It's kind of a silly idea, which may have a lot of kinks to it if you get into the nitty-gritty details. However, what made it work for me is that this plot point was clearly planned out for ages. If just thinking about the series up to this point and realizing just how much is recontextualized due to this reveal isn't enough to demonstrate that Rose Quartz being Pink Diamond was planned out, the Crewniverse readily jumped onto the net after the episode aired and expressed how awesome it was for them to finally see this moment come to fruition after all this time. Even had they not done this though, I still think it would be very clear this twist was conceived early on. But yes, all that recontextualization.
Can you just talk to me for 1 second like a real person?
I'm not a real person.
From Pearl's extreme reaction to finding out Rose kept secrets even from her, to Steven having access to Moon command bases, there are a plethora of events that now make more sense and take on additional nuance. I find it particularly funny how I was able to have a suspension of disbelief for Stevonnie dreaming of events that happened at a certain locale eons ago, whereas now, retroactively, there's no need to have a suspension of disbelief. Steven is simply starting to regain the fragmented memories of his mother in his dreams, which I think is far less of a stretch than his empathetic powers being able to witness back in time. After this reveal, I definitely have the urge to rewatch the series from the start and keep an eye out for all the small bits of foreshadowing and all the events that take on a new context in light of the reveal. I'm sure many fans have already begun doing this. And whenever a single episode makes you want to rewatch the whole series from the beginning, well, that's a hell of an episode, isn't it? Off the top of my head, my favorite line of dialogue that gains new meaning has got to be this one.
I accidentally created an alternate timeline. I learned to stay true to myself by watching myself die.
Also, Fluorite inadvertently called the twist only a handful of episodes ago.
Don't be silly. Rose Quartz isn't real.
Rose Quartz being a persona, or a gemsona rather, further contributes to why there's so much misinformation out there about who and what Rose Quartz actually was. In addition to the Pink Diamond twist recontextualizing the past, it also gives the show a new direction going forward. One obvious consequence was already shown in the preview for the next episode. The Crystal Gems are going to have some infighting as they come to terms with the truth finally being in the open. I'm curious whether this will be another group squabble that gets resolved after only 1 or 2 episodes, or if this will permanently change the group dynamic as we know it. Perhaps, in fact, probably, it's too much to hope for the latter, but it would be interesting if characters start diverging from the roles they've been molded into over the course of the series and start taking on new roles. If Homeworld finds out the truth about Pink Diamond, this will cause big waves. There are so many possibilities. Blue and Yellow Diamond actually seem to care deeply for Pink, so who knows how that's gonna play out. We haven't even seen White Diamond yet, so if I had to wager a bet, she may end up actually being the final villain of the show. Whatever happens, I'm just hoping the Diamond fiasco will be handled with delicacy and care, and not be rushed and unbelievable. If Blue and Yellow Diamond pull a Topaz on us, I am going to flip out. In light of the big reveal, it also seems par for the course that we would revisit the gems bubbled away in the temple. If Steven manages to find a way to be able to reverse Jasper's corruption, she's going to have a hell of a time reconciling all her conflicting feelings and thoughts.
You can't manipulate me, Rose Quartz!
Jasper is gonna have a meltdown if she finds out the sheer extent Rose Quartz manipulated everyone. Once again, I'm just hoping we don't have a Topaz moment where Jasper decides to change allegiance on the fly, although I'm very curious just how Steven would even convince Jasper of the truth. Even if Steven's gem happens to rotate back to the diamond orientation in the future, I think Jasper would still just see it as another form of trickery. Then there's Bismuth, who I feel should be even more furious at Rose Quartz after finding out the truth, but prior to Steven poofing her, it did seem like she realized Rose and Steven are not the same person after all, so this rage would probably not be aimed at any of the current members of the Crystal Gems. Bismuth is a rather touchy issue, and I'm still rather peeved that the creators chose for her to remain bubbled away after her 2-part episode. You'd think Pearl and Garnet would want to converse with her after the ordeal and see if they could reach some kind of understanding, but if we're going to delay the confrontation with Bismuth until now, once again, I just hope it's handled in an interesting and believable manner when we get to it. I personally thought there were problematic aspects with the way Bismuth was handled, so I'm curious whether the Crewniverse will be able to iron out those issues with future episodes. While in general, I'm liking how Rose Quartz being Pink Diamond reshapes a lot of character dynamics, I have to say, I'm not a fan of how Steven is now even more so the chosen one. I'm generally not fond of main characters being special because of their parental lineage, and while this was already the case with the legacy of Rose Quartz being thrust upon him, it's now magnified when Rose Quartz just so happened to also be Pink Diamond. Steven is now Pink Diamond, or a biologically infused remix of her, due to some help from Greg. And I worry that some things will feel like a cop-out because Steven can use his status as a diamond to progress certain plot points. However, at the expense of Steven being extra special due to lineage, his mother becomes even more divisive, deceitful, and in my opinion, even more interesting of a character. And you know what? I'll gladly take that trade-off. Steven Universe was always about the deconstruction of Rose Quartz. We were introduced to her as this nearly perfect person who everyone loved, but with time, we grew to know more and more of her flaws and shortcomings. And now, the deconstruction of Rose Quartz has been amped up to 11.
You know Rose. She always did what she wanted.
Oh my, she most certainly did. I should clarify sooner than later that I don't think Rose is now a bad or evil person. It's far more complex than that, and that's what makes her such a great character. Rose cared deeply about her comrades, hell, even about Gemkind altogether. That's why she was so opposed to shattering gems of the opposing forces. I think Rose genuinely thought that what she was doing was best for the Earth. Rose was, however, a self-righteous free spirit with poor impulse control, which isn't always the best set of attributes when you're leading a rebellion. I believe she often did have a hard time separating whether her decisions were based on her own excitement or based on if she thought it was the right thing. I think it's likely the lines were so blurred in her mind that such a delineation couldn't even be made. I especially like how the expression she was given when she expressed excitement over a future without Pink Diamond was nearly maniacal. I think that single expression does a fantastic job of illustrating just how self-absorbed Rose can become in regards to her own fantasies and desires. It's interesting how Rose Quartz is usually portrayed as mature and wise, and the first time we see Pink Diamond, she's portrayed as the polar opposite, immature, naive, childlike even. Since we didn't actually get to see much of Pink Diamond between then and this reveal, we now as an audience get to reconcile the two wildly different personalities, and I feel like this was a deliberate choice. The creators are telling us Rose falls somewhere in the middle of these two polar opposites. The idea of Rose Quartz was the person Pink Diamond wanted to be, but remnants of the selfish, naive, and reckless nature of Pink certainly stayed behind. Changing the way she looks won't change the type of person she is, after all. Which, I think that's all awesome. I love it when characters can have deep flaws and have led lives of questionable decisions, while still trying to make a positive change in the world. And it's not like Rose Quartz is blind to her own flaws either. She's stated several times throughout the series that she's done terrible things. She definitely has reflected on the shame and guilt she feels, so while I wouldn't correct anybody who claims that Rose may have narcissistic tendencies, she would not qualify as a full-blown narcissist. I can't help but feel, however, that Pink Diamond was, at least in certain ways, a bit of a coward. Heck, the claim can be made that Rose Quartz was created out of cowardice, as Pink wanted to explore her newfound interest in organic life in secret. It seems Pink Diamond never tried to be open with the other diamonds about her true feelings. Instead of approaching the diamonds head-on and telling them she finds value in organic life and wants to preserve it, Pink masqueraded as Rose Quartz for hundreds of years, pitting two unknowing factions of troops that technically both served her against each other, all in an effort to convince the other diamonds that Earth should be abandoned as a colony. Perhaps Pink thought if the other diamonds knew of her deeds and desires, they would commandeer control of the Earth and continue the colonization plans, turning the planet into a lifeless husk. But then why not declare war against Homeworld as a diamond? Perhaps Pink feared not enough gems would side with her, that it would be a one-sided war, so her only choice was to gradually grow resistance as Rose Quartz. Maintaining her normal role as a diamond kept Homeworld's involvement fairly minimal, allowing Pink to masquerade as Rose Quartz and keep the rebellion alive and growing. Pink was performing a delicate balancing act with countless lives on the line. But in a way, Rose was Pink's potential demise. Once the rebellion saw Rose as its leader, Pink surely thought revealing the truth might jeopardize everything, as trust would be shattered. Pink was trapped in the hole she dug for herself. I can't help the feeling that Pink's plan to shatter herself was as much to free herself from her double life as it was to free the Earth. Maybe that's why Pink was so excited and giddy about the prospect of deceptively having herself shattered. She could finally stop living a double life and fully embrace the role of the person she wanted to be. As we already know, her plan led to far more tragedy than she anticipated. The other diamonds didn't pack up and leave nicely. They basically sent a fuck all this shit laser at the Earth that corrupted all but a handful of the crystal gems. Also, they left the cluster on the planet to wreck it later for good measure. Now, Rose may have made some questionable decisions due to fear during the war, but it's Rose's actions after the war that truly reveal her cowardice. The crystal gems did reclaim the Earth, and yet for thousands of years, Rose decided to embrace her lie. She never told Garnet or anyone else the truth, all the way until the very end. She gave her life up to become Steven without coming clean about her identity. Hell, not even just about herself. Bismuth too. Like, Rose could have tried to reconcile with Bismuth post-war and see if Bismuth could be swayed, but that would force her to reveal that she disposed of Bismuth in the first place to the others, so Rose just decided to let secrets stay secrets. Rose's legacy was something phenomenal. After all, she set a course of events that changed the way gems view the world, and she did save the Earth. But the legacy of rose quartz was also built on deception. Speaking of the legacy of rose quartz, I can't forget to mention actual rose quartz gems and what became of them.
She was shattered by a rose quartz. The entire cut of gem deserves the same fate.
But they were hers.
Because Pink Diamond disguised herself as one of the gem lines made in Earth kindergartens, Homeworld made it so all other rose quartz cuts were no longer allowed to exist. By Pink Diamond becoming rose quartz, she doomed all the real rose quartzes. That's some heavy stuff right there. Although yes, these gems haven't been shattered yet, despite Yellow's insistence, so there's hope for them yet. The twist of rose quartz becoming Pink Diamond does so much for Steven Universe, changing our understanding of the past and carving out a new direction for the future. I think the twist works well because of how much it shakes things up, and because it further deconstructs the character of Rose Quartz to brand new heights, and makes her even more interesting and deeply flawed than ever before. While this video is about to come to a close, I'm not done talking about Pink Diamond quite yet. I will have one more video coming out centering around the revelations in A Single Pale Rose, and it will be discussing the questions that popped up in my mind in light of the new information. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you enjoy my content, I hope you consider supporting me on Patreon. It would be a great help, and I hope you tune in for the next video. See you then.